Hi there, this is Danny Flexen for Seconds Out with the latest edition of ReFLEXions. We're here every Monday, 4:30 PM to talk about the boxing action of the weekend just gone. And this week I'm going to be talking about Joe Joyce's latest victory, and this time over rugged, seasoned world contender Carlos Takam on Saturday night at Wembley Arena. Very good win for Joyce. A lot of critics came out after the event, or during the event as well, and we'll talk about that. But I thought his 6th round stoppage was quicker than anyone else had managed, and I know there's some controversy over the stoppage itself, and I will discuss that. But I felt that overall it was a good performance. He lost a lot of the early rounds, it's fair to say. Takam was busier, more accurate, and was able to use his head movement to get inside quite effectively. But it always felt like a marathon rather than a sprint. Although Joyce took a lot of shots, he's got a very good chin. A lot of people would say he shouldn't prove it quite as often as he does. But it always felt like it was going to go the other way and the momentum was going to swing. And that certainly happened towards the end of the 5th round and then into the 6th. Even though Takam was having greater success in those early sessions, Joyce was able to put on pressure using his jab. And his footwork especially put a lot of pressure on Takam with his feet, hurried him into making decisions, made him move, manoeuvred him around the ring. So even though he was losing the rounds, he was kind of putting the investment in to ensure he won the war. So yeah, manoeuvred Takam around the ring, forced him to throw and fight at a pace that he probably wasn't comfortable with, not over a 12-round distance. And as I say, Takam's a rugged and seasoned campaigner, but to fight at a pace that Joe sets at heavyweight, and he manages to set the pace without throwing a lot of shots himself. He's quite efficient in that regard, which means that while his opponent's getting tired out by being forced to do the majority of the work, Joe's still relatively fresh, and when he sees an opening, he's ready to take over. And yes, we know he's not the fastest, but because he's got that volume punching, pressure style, he doesn't really need to be, and he hits very hard. He's not necessarily a concussive one-punch knockout artist like a Deontay Wilder or in previous years even a Mike Tyson, but he's one of those where every shot hurts, or certainly looks like it does. I'm in no hurry to find out from a personal perspective, but from what I've seen and from what opponents and sparring partners have said, every shot hurts and he throws a lot of them, so it must feel like just getting clumped over and over and over. And even though you look at him from the outside, and a lot of people who've sparred him have said this, you look at him from the outside and think he's slow, he's not the most accurate, I can get out of the way, I can outbox him, I can stay out of trouble. Doing that for 12 rounds with the amount of work Joe puts in and how fit he is, and his feet are nowhere near as slow as his hands. His feet are actually pretty quick, but more importantly, his footwork is intelligent, and he knows where to go and when to go to maneuver his opponents where he wants to be. And just because he's not winning rounds doesn't mean he's not putting tactics in place that will ultimately help him win the fight. And I think some people were switched on to that across social media on Saturday night. They were saying, yeah, Takam's winning this, but he's going to gas. Or, yeah, Takam's doing really well at the moment, but Joe's making him work. And that's kind of the people who had the idea. But other people were just saying, oh, Joe's rubbish, this. And a lot of people after the fight were saying, oh, he's too open, he's too slow. If he does this, if he produces this sort of performance against the likes of Joshua, Fury, Wilder, he'll lose, he'll get knocked out. Now, that may well be true, but not simply because it was a bad performance or because of his limitations. Joe might just not be good enough to beat Fury, Joshua and Wilder, who are still regarded as the 3 best heavyweights in the world. We will wait and see. But he more than makes up for his flaws with his his skills and the things that he's good at, his assets, if you like. And I think for all the people who are saying, yeah, well, if he keeps doing this, he's going to get knocked out, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if you keep saying that, eventually, unless we're going to say Joe Joyce ends his career unbeaten, which I think is unlikely, eventually you're going to be right, aren't you, if you keep saying it, because eventually he will step up to a level where he fights someone who's better than him. And it might not be that the crucial things people are picking out now become those pivotal factors in that fight. He might not lose to a Joshua or a Fury predominantly because he's too open defensively. He might lose for a completely different reason. But people will then be able to say, ah, told you so. I always said when he stepped up he'd get knocked out. They were saying it before Dubois. He beat Dubois. Now, Dubois was an unproven contender, but clearly a massive puncher. Joe took plenty of shots in that fight, stood up to them. Then they said it about Takam. He might not be as powerful as Dubois, but he's a seasoned campaigner. He's physically strong. He's dangerous with his head as well as his hands. Will Joe come unstuck? No. He weathered the storm, even if I'm not sure you'd even call it a storm, because I felt like Joyce was in control of what was going on, even when he wasn't winning the rounds. But he weathered the storm, if that's what you want to call it, turned the screw when he needed to, and got his opponent out of there quicker than anyone ever has. You can't ask for much more than that. I don't think Joyce is ever going to be someone, when he's fighting another world-level operator, who wins every round, who outboxes his opponent in every round. He's got great amateur pedigree, but he's not kind of a slick, Pernell Whitaker-esque fighter, or to give it a heavyweight. He's not, an Andy Ruiz Jr. or Luis Ortiz or someone like that. Do you know what I mean? He's a pressure fighter. He's a volume puncher. He's got sound fundamentals, and he's got great dimensions. He's tall, he's lean, he's got good footwork, and he's got good reach. So all those things put together are why he was such an effective amateur and why he continues to be a very effective pro, where the gloves are smaller and there's no head guards and he hits very, very hard. So I think, he's a very good fighter. I think the sum of his parts exceeds the individual characteristics. I think he's an exceptional fighter, but more importantly, he's got an incredibly unique style for a heavyweight, and that's going to cause anyone problems. I don't think there's any heavyweight out there that has an easy night with Joyce. I'm happy to say that. And out of the others, I think Joshua probably beats him, but I wouldn't be certain. Fury, I would be pretty confident beats him, because I just think style-wise, the way he can move around the ring laterally, the way he can take an opponent's strengths and negate them, I think he's the worst possible style for Joyce. Wilder, I'd fancy Joyce in that fight, because if anyone can take Wilder's shots, it's him. Plus the fact that he's a pressure fighter and he'll be on Wilder the whole time. He's a lot bigger than him, a lot heavier, taller maybe as well, but certainly heavier, physically stronger. I just think he can bully Wilder, and we saw it in the second Fury fight that Wilder maybe doesn't stand up too well to being pushed back. I would fancy him in that one. I think style-wise, that one would suit him. Dillian Whyte, that was one that was talked about over the weekend. I'd say that's a 50-50 fight right now. We've seen Whyte hurt. We've seen him struggle against Derek Chisora twice, for example, and Joyce is better than Chisora. He's a volume puncher. He hits hard. He's good amateur, so he can box if he needs to. If Whyte gets the opportunity, could he lay Joyce out, though, because of those defensive frailties we talked about? Possibly. It's an incredibly intriguing fight. One we'll probably never see, unfortunately, but that I would consider a 50-50 fight. So Joyce is right up there as a top 5 heavyweight in the world today. I'd fancy him over Hrgovic. As pros, I might even fancy him over Usyk. I'm waiting to see how Usyk does against Joshua. But again, style-wise, and up at that weight, where, Usyk has done the majority of his great work at cruiser, I think it'd be difficult. I know he beat Joyce as an amateur, but I think they've developed in different ways since. And Joyce is a fully fledged heavyweight now. But yeah, I think Joyce, overall, it was a good performance. And that's the second in a row after Dubois. So fair play to him. And now he's probably going to be back out in October. I think regular activity will suit him while he waits for that world title shot as the WBO #1. Let's talk about the stoppage. A lot of people said referee Steve Gray had a bit of a mare after his throwing the towel back out the ring in the Lewis Ritson fight, which I thought was terrible that time. This time, I didn't think he did anything wrong. And I'll explain why. Joyce caught through with a big left hook that wobbled Takam at the start of the round. He was never back. His legs were never really back under him after that. He had that kind of glazed look. Now, he was still aware enough to move and slip and dip, and he was throwing a few shots back, which is why Gray didn't step in at the start of the round. But after he landed a few of those shots, Joyce broke through with another shot. I think it was a right hand. And after that, Joyce threw, and I counted to make sure in the replay, Joyce threw 33 punches with nothing back from Takam. Not a punch. The last punch Takam threw, after that, there were 33 unanswered shots from Joyce. Now, they didn't all land. I'd say over half landed. But they didn't all land, and they weren't all full force power shots either. But that's not the point. Takam had stopped moving as much. He was a bit of a sitting target. 33 shots landed without him even attempting to land one back. By that point, if you're not going to throw back after the first 5 shots land, the first 10 shots land, the first 15 shots land, you're not showing the referee that you want to continue in that fight. And is the referee supposed to wait until Joyce Joyce throws another 7 to top it up to 40 shots unanswered, and then one of them actually breaks through and causes serious damage? Or does he look at the body language of both fighters, look at the way the fight's going, and say, look, this guy hasn't thrown a punch for a minute of time and 33 unanswered from the other guy. I should probably rescue him now before something serious happens. I think there's too many kind of bloodthirsty fans and pundits out there who are desperate to see serious damage, or even maybe it's not that. Maybe they just want to see a more conclusive ending. They want to see someone laid out or really rocked before someone steps in. But at the end of the day, I think most fighters know, and I know Takam complained about the stoppage, but most fighters know that if you don't throw back under a sustained barrage, and by sustained I mean far fewer punches than 33. You know, if Joyce had thrown 15 and most of them had landed and he didn't throw back, you'd say it was an acceptable stoppage. Certainly in my view, you have to throw back. Referees always say this, they have to show you something. And Takam didn't do that. So I think it was a fair stoppage, and as most people have agreed, it was only going one way anyway by that point. So no issue with Steve Gray for that. The Ritson one was another story. But obviously I want to hear what you guys think, and I know there'll be people that agree with me and people that don't. Let me know, A, what you thought of Joyce's performance, B, what you thought of the stoppage, and C, where does Joyce go from here? Because it's a tricky task to keep him motivated, to keep his skills sharpened, but at the same time ensure that he doesn't lose when he's got a guaranteed world title shot in the offing. Who would you, if you were Joyce's matchmaker, looking at who's available and the styles, who would you put him against next? That's the main question I'd like you to answer, because I'm not really sure I know the answer. Really appreciate the time as always. I'll be back on Thursday, probably on location at the Fight Camp press conference for FLEXpectations, where I'll be obviously previewing Fight Camp, appropriately enough. And then the following Monday for the next ReFLEXions at the same time. Thanks very much for your time, and I'll see you all soon.